What's up, everybody? I'm Cooper VanDriessche, back with Wednesday afternoon football, and we're going to be breaking down once again the college football playoff top 25 week 3. We're at the halfway point of these college football playoff rankings, and we got a lot to talk about. Some more movement, what the committee got right, what they got wrong, and so much more. All that and more coming up right after this. What's up, everybody? I'm Cooper VanDriessche, back with Wednesday afternoon football, and before we dive into the rankings, I want to take a moment to honor the 3 University of Virginia football players who lost their lives tragically in a shooting on campus on Sunday. Devin Chandler, Deshaun Perry, and Laval Davis Jr. Myself and Wednesday afternoon football stand with the University of Virginia during this tough time, and we are thinking about you. Now, with that being said, let's dive into the top 25 rankings. We're going to do how we did last week and the week before: 25 to 20, 20, 19 to 15, 14 to 10, and then we'll do the top 10 individually. So let's dive right in and start with number 25. Coming in for your top 25 through 21, at number 25, the Bearcats from Cincinnati. 24, NC State. 23, Oregon State. 22, Oklahoma State. And 21, Tulane. So some movement back in here after we had some teams drop out last week. So we see Cincinnati, who fell out right before the first rankings came out. Luke Fickell, a little bit of a rebuild year after that really historic run last year, the college football playoff. Yeah, still one of the best teams in the American Athletic Conference. Had that 19-game winning streak going into the game against UCF, which they lost and fell out of the AP rankings, and were not ranked in the first 2 weeks of the college football playoff, top 25. At 24, NC State. At 23, Oregon State, and at 22, Oklahoma State and Tulane, like we said. NC State, a little bit of a rebuilding year too. Had a really good year last year, beat Clemson at home. Not the same team, 7-3. Still doing great things there in Raleigh with Dave Doran. At 23, Oregon State. The Beavers fell out after week 1 after losing to Washington, and they're playing good again. I mean, this is an Oregon State team that we've seen up and down over the past few years, weren't ranked for a very long time. So Oregon State back in the top 25 at 23. 22, Oklahoma State. Had some tough losses. Had the worst loss in a Mike Gundy tenure 2 weeks ago, and then lost to Kansas the following week. Coming off a win and are back in the top 25. And they are one of those great teams. Mike Gundy knows how to coach a football team. The Cowboys are great under Mike Gundy and have been consistently. Another great Oklahoma State team, although we probably won't see them in the Big 12 championship. It's not out of the picture yet, so keep an eye on Oklahoma State. And 21, Tulane, our best group of 5 teams so far in the season until now. We'll talk about another group of 5 team that jumped ahead of them. They played UCF over the weekend and lost. That's what's going to move down to N2, so unless things go perfect for them, they most likely will not be in the New Year's Six Bowl with everything that's going on, unless something happens with that group of 5 team ahead of them. So again, some movement there in the top 25. That's usually where we'll see the most movement in and out, just because it's at the bottom of the rankings that are published. And now let's go to 20 through 16. At 20, UCF. 19, Florida State. 18, Notre Dame. 17, Washington. And 16, UCLA. So UCF, Gus Malzahn doing great things in Central Florida with the Knights. We're joking around now that Auburn has fired their head ball coach, that he will be replacing them, but everyone knows that Gus Malzahn was fired from Auburn at the end of the 2020 season. Just want to see how good he's doing down there in Central Florida when Auburn are struggling right now after firing their head coach midway through the season. So should UCF win out the rest of their schedule, finish 11-2, we will most likely see them in that New Year's Six Bowl game, unless by some miracle some other group of 5 team just comes out of nowhere these last few weeks. But I don't see it happening. I think UCF, who has been there before, won the Fiesta Bowl before, will be back in a New Year's Six Bowl game. At 19, the Seminoles of Florida State. When those original powerhouse teams are in the rankings, college football is better for it, and I'm a true supporter of that statement. And Florida State is back in there. Mike Norvell done great things. Had that big win over LSU in week 1, who LSU is now ranked in the top 10. So big things coming for the Florida State Seminoles. We're not there yet, but we're on the path of saying that Florida State is on the way to being back after having a tough few years following the resignation of Jimbo Fisher. At number 18, the University of Notre Dame, the Fighting Irish, squeaked out a win over unranked 3-8 Navy, 3-7 Navy. Yeah, the Irish are getting better every time they take the field. The senior day this weekend against Boston College for the Holy War. Going to be interesting. Will they play down to an opponent like they did at Navy, or will they have one of those performances they did at Clemson? Now, you would imagine that with the senior day, there might be a little bit more there. But again, it's an Notre Dame team that's still a little bit unpredictable, and they will close out their season with USC next weekend. At 17, the Huskies of Washington just keep winning. Beat Oregon over the weekend, which is a huge win. Oregon was still in the hunt for the college football playoff, and now with that second win, they're pretty much out of it. And just in that's a big rivalry, Washington and Oregon. So again, Kalen DeBoer doing great things in his first year. We see a lot of first-year head coaches here, a lot of first, second-year head coaches, and lots of good things at their new schools, and it's pretty awesome to see. At 16, UCLA. Chip Kelly had suffered a tough loss over the weekend at Arizona. I mean, another team, kind of the reverse of Washington. They beat a big team. UCLA lost to a team that on paper they should have beat. That's what makes college football so great, that you never know who's going to win. It's ever who's going to play the toughest on that day. No matter what's on paper going into the game, it's whoever's going to play the best on that day will come out victorious on that Saturday. And UCLA just didn't do it. Now UCLA is still a great football team. 16 might be, I believe, a little low for them, but again, they've proven a lot this year, and I think Chip Kelly can show. This has probably been one of the biggest tests of Chip Kelly's career. He was great at Oregon. I'm not going to talk about NFL because that's just a whole different type of the ball game. But UCLA has been a tough test for Chip Kelly, and I think if everything, I obviously can believe he's going to finish with at least 10 wins. He's going to win these last 2 regular season games, as he will go this weekend and face USC, which is going to be a big game. So USC, UCLA, that's a big game. It's going to have some championship implications for you on the ladder of that USC. Okay, let's go through 15 and then 15 through 11. Coming in at 15 is Kansas State, 14 Ole Miss, 13 North Carolina, 12 Oregon, 11 Penn State. Start off with Kansas State. They've been a little bit of a bounce back following a loss to the hands of Texas 2 weeks ago. But they're still in the top 15, and this weekend they will play West Virginia. So a game that on paper looks like Kansas State will win. Having a great year there with the transfer from Nebraska. The Big 12 is also, I mean, not as, going into the season, you thought the Big 12 is going to be a little bit stronger than how it's turned out to be. But you see some of those American Athletic Conference teams that are winning as well, and Cincinnati and UCF, who are going to be in the Big 12 next year. So that's a lot of promise for the Big 12 in the future, especially with a 12-team playoff on the coming. Okay, number 14, Ole Miss suffered that tough loss to Alabama over the weekend. Lane Kiffin has got it down, and it's really thrown his name into some head coaching searches, such as that at Auburn. But does Lane leave Ole Miss? I don't know. He's found a place where he can win. Struggled to do that at USC and kind of Tennessee as well. But his win at Tennessee got on the job at USC, plus his being an offensive coordinator there. But still, I don't think Lane leaves Ole Miss. I could be totally wrong on this statement, but I think he's found the place where he wants to be for now at least. And a realistic place where I could see him, because I know Nick Saban just signed a contract extension through 2030, I believe. I think I could see him replacing Nick Saban at Alabama, realistically on paper. So, I mean, lots of things come for Ole Miss and the Rebels with Lane Kiffin. 13, North Carolina clinched a spot by winning the ACC Coastal with a win over Wake Forest over the weekend. Mac Brown, I was on Twitter over the week, saw a stat that if Texas wouldn't have let go of Mac Brown, although he resigned, it was kind of like a forced resignation, they would have 18 more wins with his 9 worst seasons than they do currently in the time since he's been gone. Crazy to think. Mac Brown knows how to coach, and I think he's finally found his quarterback. Drake May, Heisman sleeper, doesn't get nearly enough love, and that's going to be the same thing with Stetson Bennett. Those two are kind of like the outsiders, and they really don't get enough love when it comes to that race. And I think, look at the stats compared to CJ Stroud, he's right there. I don't think he's lower than him in anything. He was even higher in some, so he really needs to be looked at by the committee. And if he doesn't get a vote, I think that just calls into question what the Heisman committee looks at. At number 12, Oregon, coming off of that tough loss to Washington. Dan Lanning is still doing a great job in his first year there, and playing at Autzen Stadium where it never rains, but it rained over the weekend with that loss to Washington, breaking a win streak at home. Oregon still has to prove themselves. They got Utah and USC ahead of them in the top 10. So to get in that top 25, that Pac-12 playoff, because they're not doing divisions, they're doing just best record. It's going to come down to who beat who and who's going to finish out the best. At 11, Penn State had some tough losses to Ohio State and Michigan, but one of the best teams in the Big Ten. That division of the Big Ten is arguably one of the best in college football. Anywhere, really, if they were in the other division, they'd be destroying it. And the Penn State and the Nittany Lions are on their way back to dominance. At the beginning of the season, I talked about this on a previous episode of Wednesday Afternoon Football. People said James Franklin's reached his peak there, which is so unfair to say to a coach and the players on the team that are recruiting, going there to be that best, to win the Big Ten. And I think in a given time, things will work out for James Franklin and the Nittany Lions. Okay, the top 10. We're going to go do these one at a time, 10 all the way up to 1. Coming in at number 10, the Utes of Utah, Kyle Whittingham, doing some great things there. Beat USC. And looking for that spot in the Pac-12 championship after they won last year. And they're still in the fight for a New Year's Six bowl game. Just got to finish out the season as well as they've gotten to this point. No more losses, and the Utah Utes will be fine. And number 9, Clemson, 9-1 without a sole loss coming to Notre Dame. Clinched their ACC Atlantic Division title and will be playing Mac Brown and his Tar Heels in a few weeks. Dabo came back after a really tough loss to Notre Dame, and they played well against a very good Louisville team and kind of put it to them. So they still got a few games left. It's going to be the big test between them and North Carolina, because I know they play South Carolina, a rivalry game last week of season. I believe it's Miami this weekend. So on paper, it is Dabo's season to finish out. But again, they got to get past these two last opponents. And Beamer ball, you never know how it's going to go over in South Carolina. And in rivalry games, I always say records are thrown out the window. So we'll see how Dabo finishes. At number 8, the Crimson Tide, Alabama, Nick Saban beating Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin over the weekend. He will say Alabama's gone. No, I think they're just on a speed bump. And the SEC is so good to an extent. I mean, basically, the competition is so good that it almost like eats each other alive, because it's so good in that competition that it's hard to find those consistently good teams, because there are so many good players in that SEC. But I think Nick Saban's got it figured out. And as much as people want to say that he's on the way out because of his age, because he's been there for so long, Nick Saban, Alabama will be fine. They will be fine. People need to stop overreacting to a few losses. 2 losses in the middle of the season, other teams would be so happy to have that. Teams like Navy would be happy to have that. Teams like USF, some of the worst teams in college football, would be fine to have that. So Alabama and Nick Saban will be fine. At number 7, the Trojans, Southern California, Lincoln Riley in his first season there. Big test this weekend against UCLA. Wins that game. Going to have some Pac-12 implications, as USC lost to Utah early in this season. So it might be a rematch there in the Pac-12. Just how things work out. And then they have a test coming to the Coliseum in a few weeks when Notre Dame travels there. At number 6, LSU sitting 8-2, making their case to be the first 2-loss team to ever make the playoff if they were to win an SEC championship. And a situation like that, you might see 3 SEC teams in the college football playoff. We'll just have to wait and see, because there are some good teams in that top 5. And I think some other conferences need to be taken a look at by the committee. But no, props to Brian Kelly for doing a great job so far in his first season. At number 5, the Vols, Tennessee, after that tough loss against Georgia, they really put it to their opponents this last week and through the season as a whole. The Georgia was just a speed bump. Georgia is a good team, and if things work the way, the Vols could be national champions in 2022. At number 4, the Horned Frogs at TCU beat Texas 17-10 at home over the weekend. That's a big game for them, and the TCU's got a tough schedule. They got to win out, and that's the only way they'll make the playoff, because there's no way their one loss I can see making the college football playoff. But there's a lot of one-loss teams that could move up there. Just have to wait and see. At number 3, Michigan. Played around with Rutgers 2 weeks ago. Put it to Nebraska over the weekend at home. Got the game coming up next week in Columbus, and that's going to put some implications. I really hope that the committee looks at a Big Ten on that division, gets both teams in, because Ohio State and Michigan, I think they both deserve to be in the college football playoff. At number 2, like I just mentioned, Ohio State got the game coming up next weekend and at home. Going to be a big game for Ryan Day, and lots of implications on the championship, like we said, in Michigan. They kind of one and the same, but what really hurts Michigan, I guess, would be the non-conference schedule. Hawaii, Connecticut, Colorado State, some pretty rough, some teams that on paper are not the greatest, really pretty bad. I guess Notre Dame, the one that would be comparable for Ohio State is Notre Dame, close beating in week 1. And then I guess the committee also would look at how they barely beat Northwestern, but you got to take the environment of those conditions. The wind was super bad in Evanston, so Ohio State, I believe, will make the college football playoff. And lastly, the number 1 team, Georgia. Got some cupcake games this weekend. They will play They will play Kentucky, who is not super good this year, but again, an SEC game. Kentucky not bad, but they did lose to Vanderbilt, and Vanderbilt snapped a 24-game winning streak. So congrats to Vanderbilt for snapping a 24-game losing streak, in the SEC. But Georgia is the outright number one team right now. They look the best. They put it to the number one team, Tennessee, a few weeks ago, and they're just playing good football. I think Kirby Smart has figured out what works for him. That's really exciting to see. And I don't want to see, it's just the new Alabama. That's what people said about LSU in 2019. We'll see what happened when we all see what happened there. It's all about recruiting. So who's going to recruit the best over the next few years? And right now, Georgia's winning that game. And you know who's not winning that game? Texas A&M. They're winning recruiting, but they're not winning coaching. So Jimbo Fisher might be on the hot seat with that $86 million buyout. But anyway, those are the top 25. Not too much movement this week. Pretty much the same. We got some Oregon, yes, UCLA, some losses there. But other than that, pretty similar to last week. Still a lot to change. Still 2 weeks of football left to play. But with that being said, that wraps up this edition of Wednesday Afternoon Football. I'm Cooper VanDriessche. See you guys next week.